I put vegetables in all my food so that my roommate's starving kid won't eat what I set aside just for myself. And when his mom found out, she was furious. I'm 26 and live in a rented house with a single mother, 30, and her 6-year-old son. I used to live with someone else, but they moved out and the mother moved in. I don't mind living with her and her kid. It's fine, and we each do our own thing. I spend a lot of time at my boyfriend's place or working. Our work schedules overlap, so we don't really interact much, but when we do, it's fine. No issue there. I want to start by saying that I know she's clearly struggling financially, but I don't think that's an excuse. I don't make a lot of money either. However, I noticed that my food would go missing or that portions were being taken. I assumed it was her kid, so I calmly asked her to stop him from eating my food. She just said she would. At first, it didn't really bother me, but it started getting annoying when I'd come home from work expecting to have enough leftovers for a meal, only to see that they had been picked through or were just completely gone. I kept bringing it up, and she started getting annoyed with me for mentioning it. By observing them, I realized that neither of them eats vegetables. Judging by the food that disappeared versus what remained untouched, anything green was avoided. Orange chicken would be gone, but chicken with broccoli would stay untouched. So, I started putting vegetables in everything. I find vegetables delicious, and anything green or not a potato wouldn't get eaten. So if I mix some bell peppers into my food, it would be safe. I already make big portions of vegetables pretty often, so I just started putting them in everything I eat. If I had leftover meat, mashed potatoes, I'd pour green beans into them and mix it up. If I had leftover cheesy bacon fries, I'd throw broccoli on top and mix it in. Usually my homemade meals already had vegetables, but I made sure absolutely everything did. I made a big pot of mac and cheese, the kids' favorite food, and added roasted Brussels sprouts. To me, that's delicious. Plus, I'm eating more vegetables, so it's a win-win. She had already seemed annoyed, but one day we were all home when I made the mac and cheese. She was in the living room and saw me take out the Brussels sprouts. She asked, "What are you going to do with that?" And I poured them into the pot. She said I was being selfish and annoying. I just replied that I like Brussels sprouts and left it at that. Then she started complaining, saying, "We need food." So I told her to go buy some or stop spending money only on processed food because her money would stretch further. I think she sees this as some sort of revenge, but I simply want to be able to eat my own food. I also want to clarify that sharing food is not the issue. The problem is expecting food to be there and constantly finding it gone. I'd work all day, come home expecting to have enough leftovers for a meal, only to see that it had completely disappeared. Or I'd wake up in a rush in the morning with my food ready to eat, only to find it was gone. So I'd have to skip breakfast. If she would at least send a message asking, "Hey, is it okay if we eat this?" I'd know and could make other plans. I could stop for food or prepare to cook when I got home. Also, I think eating the last portion of someone else's food without permission is crazy and rude. If someone makes a big pot of food and you ask for a serving, fine. But if someone made something and there's only one serving left and you eat it without asking, that's just downright evil. I hadn't even finished eating when she started again. "You're being selfish. How can you not care about a child? He's hungry." I took a deep breath, feeling my irritation grow. This isn't about not caring for a child. It's about the fact that I cook my own food with ingredients I buy with my own money. If we were supposed to cook for everyone, then you should be helping too, and sometimes cooking as well. But that's not how it works, is it? She crossed her arms and looked at me like I was some kind of monster. "I don't have time. I work. I take care of him. I do my best. I work too. I have my own responsibilities. And no matter how much you try to act like the victim, at the end of the day, I'm the only one cooking and getting my food stolen." She opened her mouth to say something, but hesitated. Maybe because, deep down, she knew I was right. "It's not fair that he goes hungry." I let out a bitter laugh. "Hungry? He's not going hungry. You buy food, just not real food. I see the bags of chips, the sodas, the frozen pizzas. The problem isn't that he doesn't have anything to eat. It's that he prefers my food. Because your food is good. And why am I supposed to be the one feeding him?" She had no answer. We just stood there, staring at each other in tense silence. My blood was boiling. She wanted me to be her kid's unofficial caretaker, to become the house cook without even asking if I was okay with it. If you're struggling financially, I continued, I get it. But that doesn't justify taking my food without asking. I already told you I talked to him. You said that, but it hasn't changed anything. Because it keeps happening. She huffed, stood up abruptly, and stormed out of the kitchen. A second later, her bedroom door slammed shut, echoing through the house. I sighed, a bitter taste in my mouth. This wasn't going to end well. I got home after a long day at work, already looking forward to the dinner I had left in the fridge. I had prepared something simple but tasty, enough to last at least another meal. But when I opened the fridge, my stomach dropped. My food was gone. I looked around, hoping I had just misplaced it. Then, when I turned toward the trash can, my heart started pounding. There it was, tossed in with the garbage, the container still smeared with the remains of what should have been my dinner. My blood boiled. What the hell happened to my food? I asked, my voice already sharp with anger. My roommate appeared in the doorway, looking like she had been expecting this moment. There were maggots in it, she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. I went to get some water and saw one on the edge of the container. A fly must have laid eggs through the hole in the lid. It didn't seem safe, so I threw it away. I stood there in silence for a moment. That had never happened before. Maggots? Fly eggs? Just the thought of it made me nauseous. I sighed, pushing my anger aside. Well, thanks, I guess. She nodded like she had done me a favor. I was still uneasy about it, but I didn't want to be irrational. If there really were maggots, then she did the right thing. But the next day, everything changed. That evening, I took my time preparing a special meal. I splurged on better ingredients, made something more elaborate, something actually worth looking forward to. High-quality meat, fresh seasonings, a touch of wine in the recipe, and, of course, vegetables. I made sure to add plenty of them, confident that this would keep anyone else from touching it. I stored everything in the fridge, feeling proud of the meal I had made. I was already looking forward to it. But when I got home that night and opened the fridge, again, my food was gone. My chest burned with rage as I opened the trash can and once again saw my container dumped inside. This time, still full. My entire dinner wasted. The delicious smell of the food mixed with the stench of garbage only made my fury worse. My hands trembled. I went straight to her room and banged on the door. No patience left. She opened it, already looking like she knew why I was there. What now? What now? I repeated, incredulous. You threw away my food again. She shrugged, completely unfazed. I saw another maggot. Must have been the same thing as yesterday. I froze for a moment, trying to process what I had just heard. Again, on the exact night, I decided to cook a more expensive meal? Well, I was just trying to help. If you want to eat food full of bugs, that's your problem. That was it. You're lying. Her expression hardened. What? You're lying? My blood was boiling. You threw it away because you didn't want me to eat it. Because it had vegetables. Because I made something better for myself, and you just couldn't stand it. She scoffed, but for a split second, I saw hesitation in her eyes. Oh, come on. You're being paranoid. Then show me. She frowned. What? Show me the maggot. You always throw it away immediately, never show me anything. Prove to me that it was rotten. She hesitated. That silence was all the proof I needed. My stomach twisted with rage. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't enough that she let her kid eat my food without asking. Now she was outright throwing it away just so I couldn't have it. I clenched my fists, taking a deep breath to stop myself from exploding right then and there. I pay for that food. I take the time to cook, to plan my meals, so I have something decent to eat after work. And you just decide I don't get to eat? She rolled her eyes, annoyed. Stop being dramatic. Just buy something else. I stared at her, feeling my anger rise to a level I hadn't reached before. She crossed her arms, clearly thinking I wasn't going to do anything about it. But she was wrong, because this was the last straw. I couldn't look at her without feeling pure disgust. That day, after she shrugged as if she had the right to throw my food away and told me to just buy something else, I knew I was done. I wasn't going to keep living like this, playing the role of an unpaid chef for her and her kid while she acted like I owed her something. She had crossed a line. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep, thinking about every ridiculous thing I had put up with in that house. From the moment I first noticed my food going missing, to the excuses, the way she tried to guilt trip me, and finally the peak of it all, throwing my food in the trash without a second thought. It was obvious she wasn't going to stop. If I stayed, she'd just keep acting the same way, expecting me to roll over and accept it. But I'm not that kind of person. So, the next morning, I made my decision. Before heading to work, I stopped by the property management office to talk directly with the landlord. I knew the lease was in my name, and that she was only living there because I let her move in when my old roommate left. She had never signed anything. I explained the situation briefly, keeping it simple. I just told him that living there had become unbearable and I wanted to terminate the lease. The landlord, an older man who was all business, listened carefully and asked a few questions about notice periods and formalities. Luckily, I had enough time left on my lease to leave without any problems, so he approved my request. And then he said something that made me smile inside. If she wanted to stay, she'd have to sign a new lease and cover the rent on her own. That was all I needed to hear. With that settled, I started making plans to move out. I found a small apartment closer to work. It was a bit more expensive, but every penny was worth it to never have to deal with that parasite again. In the meantime, I acted as if nothing had changed. I didn't want her to suspect anything. But the day I started packing, she noticed. "What are you doing?" she asked, standing at my bedroom door, staring at the boxes and bags. "Packing my stuff. I'm moving out." Her expression shifted instantly. "What? What do you mean, moving out?" I kept folding my clothes, not even looking at her. "Exactly that. I'm done with this ridiculous situation, so I'm leaving." She let out a dry laugh, crossing her arms. "And you think you can just leave like that?" I finally looked at her. "I can and I will. I already spoke to the landlord. The lease was under my name, so I canceled it. If you want to stay, you'll have to sign a new contract and pay the rent yourself." The color drained from her face. "You can't do this." "I just did." She blinked, clearly trying to process what was happening. "And how do you expect me to pay this rent alone?" "Not my problem." "You're such an asshole," she yelled, furious. "You're really going to leave me here with a kid and nowhere to go? I never forced you to move in here. You came because you wanted to. What happens now is your responsibility." She huffed, rage building in her face. "This is all because of that damn food, isn't it? This is just revenge." I smirked sarcastically. "No, I'm doing this because I realize you're a freeloader. But if you want to call it revenge, be my guest." She stormed off, slamming the door behind her, muttering curses under her breath. But I didn't care anymore. Over the next few days, she tried everything. She screamed. She guilt-tripped me. She even pretended to be sorry, saying we needed to talk. But I wasn't falling for it. Then, when moving day came, she lost it completely. "You're going to regret this," she shouted as I walked out with my last box. "I swear, you'll regret it." I just chuckled. "I doubt it." She tried calling me multiple times afterward, but I blocked her. It didn't take long for reality to hit her. Without the ability to pay rent on her own, she was evicted just a few weeks later. And when I found out, I celebrated with a damn good meal. This time, without anyone to throw it in the trash. The following days were pure peace. I cooked my meals without rushing, stored leftovers in the fridge, and, surprise, they were still there when I came back. No one was touching my stuff, no one was stealing my food, no one was throwing away what was mine. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had full control over my own home. The sense of freedom was incredible. I could cook full meals without having to hide them, buy better ingredients without worrying they'd go to waste. I even invested in some higher quality kitchen tools. I was comfortable, relaxed, living the way any person should, until the messages started. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. I got a notification from an unknown number. "You're a monster. How could you abandon a mother and her child like that?" I frowned, deleted the message without thinking too much about it. But then another one came in. "Be a real man. A real man wouldn't let a child go without food. You selfish piece of shit." Then another, and another. Suddenly, my phone was flooded with messages, some from unknown numbers, others from fake profiles on Instagram and Facebook. Some were straight-up insults, others were guilt trips. That's when I realized they were her friends. It didn't take long for one of them to make it clear. She's living on favors now, struggling because you were so cruel and selfish. You could have been a real man and helped her until she got back on her feet. But no, you chose to be a childish little brat. I actually laughed when I read that. I grabbed my phone and typed a reply. I'm not her father, and I sure as hell am not the father of her kid. What happens to her now is not my problem. The response came almost immediately. You have no heart. Who abandons a mother and a child like that? Especially after sharing a home with them? She didn't share anything. I wrote back. She just used the space I paid for her and took advantage of the fact that I cooked. If you care so much, why don't you let her move into your place? Silence. But more messages kept coming. People I didn't even know were calling me heartless, selfish, cruel. Some were trying to give me life lessons. You may not be the father, but a real man protects those in need. Life goes in circles. One day you'll need help, and no one will be there for you. The least you could have done was keep paying rent until she got back on her feet. Pathetic. I blocked them one by one. But the best part? She finally tried reaching out herself. After being evicted, after sending her friends to harass me, she finally decided to text me. And when I read her message, I realized she genuinely believed I was responsible for fixing her problems. You ruined me. You put me in this situation. I hope you're proud of yourself. You threw me and my son onto the streets without a second thought. All for revenge. You got what you wanted, to see me at my lowest. Now tell me, are you happy? I felt a mix of irritation and amusement. I typed back calmly. All I did was leave a house where my food was being stolen and thrown away. You put yourself in this situation. I just stopped paying for your life. Good luck. Sent. Blocked. I thought the story was over when I moved out. But apparently, some people think that just because a man is living alone, he automatically has to take responsibility for a woman and her child, even when he has nothing to do with them. But I didn't care. My food was still in my fridge. My home was clean and peaceful. And finally, my life was mine alone. I thought everything was finally over. The messages had stopped. Mariana's friends had given up trying to contact me, and my life was peaceful. I cooked my meals in peace. My things stayed exactly where I left them, and no one was harassing me or trying to guilt-trip me into supporting a woman who was never my responsibility. I thought it was all behind me, but I was wrong. The worst was yet to come. It was a normal morning. I had just woken up and was making coffee when I heard knocking at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, maybe a delivery or a neighbor. But when I opened the door, I saw a man in a suit holding a thick envelope, his face too serious for this to be good news. Are you Lucas Ramirez? He asked, his tone professional and direct. Yeah, that's me. He handed me the envelope. You are being officially served. My mind went blank. Served? What the hell? I grabbed the envelope, flipping it open with growing unease, and the moment I saw the name of the plaintiff, my stomach dropped. It was Mariana. I tore through the papers, my heart pounding as I skimmed the first few lines. Petition for emotional child support. Plaintiff, Mariana Torres. Beneficiary, Matias Torres, minor. My hands clenched the pages, shaking with anger. Mariana was suing me for child support. Her reasoning? She claimed that Matias, her son, had formed a strong emotional bond with me and was now suffering emotional distress due to my absence. That because I had been a father figure to him, I was now legally obligated to provide financial support. I felt like my brain short-circuited. This is insane, I muttered, my blood boiling. The court officer let out a tired sigh, like he had seen this situation 100 times before. I just deliver the documents, Mr. Ramirez. If you want to contest the claim, your attorney will handle it. The first hearing has already been scheduled. My head was spinning. I wanted to yell, to curse, to ask how in the world this was even possible, but I knew the guy was just doing his job. I took the papers and shut the door without another word. I dropped onto the couch, flipping through the pages again and again, trying to make sense of the insanity in front of me. Yes, I had lived in the same house as the kid, but that never meant I was his father. I never acted like a stepdad, never took on any responsibility for him. I cooked for myself, and he ate because his mother let him. And now, because of that, I was supposed to pay child support? The more I read, the angrier I got. Mariana was claiming that Matias had been emotionally damaged since I left, that he asked about me, that he felt abandoned, that I had assumed a paternal role in the home, and, therefore, had a legal duty to continue providing for him. This was absolute insanity. The worst part? As ridiculous as it sounded, these types of cases existed. I had heard stories of judges ruling in favor of women in emotional child support cases, forcing men to pay for kids that weren't even biologically theirs, simply because they had spent time with them. My mind was in shock. I never wanted to be involved with this woman. I had never done anything other than let her move into the home that I was paying for. And now, because I had opened my doors to the wrong person, I was being dragged into a legal battle over something that should never have been my problem. A lump formed in my throat. A mix of rage, frustration, and disbelief hit me all at once. All of this was happening because I had once tried to be a good person, and now I understood with absolute clarity that this was the biggest mistake of my life. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. I knew the system often favored mothers, and I was sure Mariana had already prepared to play the victim. I could already picture her walking into the courtroom with that helpless, pitiful demeanor, using her son as the central piece in the play she had staged. And that's exactly what happened. When I entered the courtroom, I saw Mariana sitting next to her lawyer. She was dressed modestly, slouching slightly, as if she were the most miserable person in the world. A perfect actress. On the other side, I sat next to my lawyer, trying to remain calm. But as soon as I looked forward and saw Matthias, her son, everything became clear. The kid looked coached. He glanced at me with uncertainty, as if trying to remember what he was supposed to say. The judge presiding over the case was Judge Camila Rodriguez, and judging by her sharp, no-nonsense expression, I could tell she wasn't easily swayed by emotional theatrics. The hearing began. Mariana's lawyer stood up and started with his argument. He twisted the whole story, painting me as a father figure in Matthias's life, claiming that my sudden departure had left the child emotionally devastated, and that I had a moral and financial obligation to continue supporting him. But the part that made me angriest was when he stated that I took care of and fed the boy, as if I had willingly taken on the role of his provider. I almost laughed at the audacity. After his long and overly dramatic speech, Mariana spoke. Her voice was heavy with emotion, her eyes slightly watery, and she held her son's hand as if shielding him from some great villainy. Matthias asks about his daddy every night. He misses him. Your Honor, my child is suffering, and I just want justice for him. Daddy, she was really pushing this narrative. I was about to speak when Matthias, in the pure innocence of a child, turned to her and asked, Mommy, who was I supposed to call Daddy? The silence in the room was deafening. Even Mariana's lawyer widened his eyes in shock. Mariana turned pale. The judge, who had been patiently listening up until that moment, tilted her head and raised an eyebrow. Ms. Mariana, care to explain that? Mariana let out a nervous laugh, trying to downplay it. Oh, kids, they get confused. He's always seen Mr. Lucas as a father figure, so it's normal for him to have doubts. But the damage was already done. The judge turned to the child, her tone much softer. Sweetheart, can I ask you something? Matthias looked at his mother, who shot him a warning glare. But like any child, he simply blurted out the truth. Did you take food from Uncle Lucas, my dear? Mariana squeezed his arm, but Matthias, without understanding what was happening, innocently answered. Yes. Mommy always told me to because his food was yummy. Mariana completely froze. I saw my lawyer struggling not to laugh, and the judge leaned forward with interest. Ms. Mariana, do you have anything to say about that? Mariana tried to argue, shaking her head. That's just a child talking, Your Honor. He doesn't understand what he's saying. The judge held up her hand, cutting her off. Mr. Lucas, how long did you live with Ms. Mariana? Less than a year, Your Honor. The judge's eyes widened slightly. Less than a year? And Ms. Mariana believes that's enough time to establish a parental bond that warrants financial support? Mariana's lawyer, sensing that the case was crumbling, tried to intervene. Your Honor, the length of time doesn't necessarily negate the emotional impact on the child. But the judge raised a hand, silencing him. Yes, it does. We're not talking about a stepfather who raised a child for years. We were talking about a man who simply shared a living space with Ms. Mariana for a short period, without any legal or emotional obligation toward Matthias. She turned toward Mariana, her expression now completely stern. From what I've gathered today, you not only allowed but encouraged your child to take advantage of Mr. Lucas's food, despite him having no responsibility toward him. And now, you come to this court attempting to extort money from him? Mariana opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The judge shuffled the documents in front of her and sighed. This is a complete waste of the court's time. She turned toward me. Mr. Lucas, you are completely cleared of this claim. The ruling is in your favor. For a moment, I felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had won, but then the judge did something no one expected. She turned toward Mariana and picked up another document. Considering the clear attempt to manipulate the legal system and waste this court's time, along with the fact that Mr. Lucas had to spend money and resources to defend himself against this baseless claim, I am issuing a fine against Ms. Mariana. Mariana's eyes nearly popped out of her head. What? You will compensate Mr. Lucas for emotional distress and cover all legal fees. The impact was immediate. Her lawyer tried to appeal, but the judge ignored him. Mariana burst into tears, but the judge wasn't moved in the slightest. Case dismissed. The relief that washed over me was overwhelming. Mariana stormed out of the courtroom in tears, but I didn't feel a shred of pity. From that day forward, she never tried to approach me again, never attempted to contact me. And after everything that happened, I walked away with one invaluable lesson. Never open your doors to someone who doesn't deserve them. I've never been the type of person to hold grudges. I've always tried to move on, let bad experiences go, and learn from them. But this experience was a real test of my patience and sanity. Sometimes I think about how everything started so simply. When Mariana moved into the house, I had no big expectations. I didn't think she would be a problem. I assumed she'd be like any other roommate, someone who paid her share, respected the space, and minded her own life. How naive I was. Little by little, she started crossing boundaries, taking advantage of the situation, acting like what was mine also belonged to her, and worse, like her child was entitled to what I had worked for. And this is where many people fail to see how ridiculous this situation was. Just because you have a child doesn't mean the world owes you something. But some mothers believe it does. They think everyone around them should revolve around their child. That just because they gave birth, their kid is now some little prince or princess that we all must cater to, feed, support, and sacrifice for. But that's not how life works. I'm not a father. Never have been. Never wanted to be. And yet, they try to force me into that role, as if I were obligated to take on a responsibility I never signed up for. What infuriates me the most is how Mariana even tried to manipulate her own son to get money from me. I'll never forget the exact moment Matthias, in his pure childhood innocence, asked, "Mommy, who was I supposed to call Daddy?" That was the moment it all fell apart for her. The moment it became crystal clear that she had coached her own child to lie, to put on an act in court, all to milk money from me. What kind of person does that? A self-centered one. A woman who thinks that just because she decided to have a child, the entire world should revolve around her and that child. But the truth is the world doesn't owe anyone anything. If you choose to have a kid, it's your responsibility to raise them, provide for them, educate them, and protect them. Not mine. Not society's. Not some random guy who shared a house with you for a few months. That's the lesson Mariana never understood. The ironic part? If she had been even a half-decent person, maybe I would have helped her out at some point. Not financially, but maybe with a favor here and there like any roommate would. But she chose manipulation, guilt-tripping, and exploitation. And in the end, she paid the price. And me? How'd I end up after all this? At first, I was furious. I couldn't believe that I almost got forced to pay for a child that wasn't mine, that barely spent time with me, all because someone tried to twist the law in their favor. But then came relief. Relief that I won, that I walked away unscathed, that for once, justice actually worked. Mariana tried to play me, tried to drag me into something that was never my problem, and she failed miserably. Today, my life is more peaceful than ever. My fridge stays full, and no one takes my food without permission. My home stays clean, and no one treats it like a free shelter. I go to work, come home, and I no longer have to deal with arguments, guilt trips, or ridiculous messages from people who think the world owes them something just because they had kids. And you know what? I've never felt better. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that no one can force you to take on a responsibility that isn't yours. And I will never let anyone try again. The end.